For weeks, a man had been messaging a young mother in Michigan on Facebook. He remembered the little things. He asked how her day went. Eventually, he asked her out, and in February 2023, 23-year-old Kayla Sedoskey said yes. That night, he picked her up right on schedule, like any normal date. Except he didn't drive her to a restaurant. He drove her to an old, abandoned juvenile detention center on the edge of town. And when the car pulled up outside, she wasn't walking into a first date at all. She was walking into an ambush that had been planned for weeks by people she used to call friends. By the time this case finally closed, 6 people would be convicted for their roles in what happened to her that night. This is the story of Kayla Sedoskey, and it's one of the most calculated cases I've covered on this channel. Before we get into what happened, I want to slow down on who Kayla actually was, because in most of the coverage of this case, that part goes by fast. She was 23. She lived in Monroe, Michigan, a small city on Lake Erie, about 35 miles south of Detroit. She'd been raised since she was a little girl by her adoptive mother, Paulette, and she was a mother herself. That last detail matters more than you'd think, because in the days right after Kayla's body was found, before most of the facts of this case were public, Paulette told a local reporter something that stuck with me ever since. She believed Kayla's ex-boyfriend had been harassing her. At the time, it was just a mother's instinct. Nobody yet knew how close to the truth she really was. That ex-boyfriend was a man named Stephen Bales. He and Kayla had history. Investigators would later describe the relationship as one marked by repeated, ongoing conflict. By 2023, Stephen had moved on. He'd married a woman named Narena. Here's a detail that I think explains a lot about how 6 people ended up involved in this. At one point, Kayla and several of the people who would eventually be charged in her death had all lived together in the same apartment. By February 2023, she'd moved out. But whatever tension existed between them hadn't gone anywhere. Michigan State Police never landed on one single tidy motive for what came next. Just a group with a shared history of conflict with Kayla. Somehow enough to pull 6 people into a plan against her. That's where Bryn Smith comes in, one of Kayla's former roommates. Investigators say Smith started messaging her on Facebook, building what looked like real interest over several weeks. Conversation. Attention. The kind of steady back and forth that makes a person let their guard down. Police would later describe it plainly. He catfished her. He asked her out. She said yes. On February 15, 2023, he picked her up for their date. She had no idea what that date actually was. Before I get into exactly what happened when that car stopped, if you're the kind of viewer who wants the full, verified story instead of guesswork dressed up as fact, go ahead and hit subscribe. It genuinely helps this channel, and it means you'll catch every case we break down. Okay, let's keep going. Kayla wasn't seen again for weeks. On March 2, 2023, Michigan State Police were dispatched to the old Boysville building, a former juvenile detention center in Frenchtown Township, after a report came in from someone who'd been exploring the vacant property. Inside, troopers found her body. From there, what started as a single homicide investigation grew into something much bigger. Over the following year, Michigan State Police built a case that eventually crossed into Ohio and North Carolina. Suspects started coming in, one at a time. In April 2023, Sierra Bemis and Bryn Smith were arrested in Michigan, along with a third suspect out of Ohio. The following month, investigators caught up with Stephen Bales and his wife Narena in North Carolina, where Stephen refused to come out peacefully. It took a standoff with U.S. Marshals before the couple was finally taken into custody and extradited back to Michigan. A 6th suspect, Alexander Fico, was arrested that same month. 6 names. 6 people, each eventually facing charges in connection with her death, ranging from open murder and conspiracy down to tampering with evidence and accessory after the fact. Here's what investigators say actually happened that February night. Bryn Smith drove Kayla straight to Boysville, a hollowed-out building with broken windows and no power, sitting in the very township where Stephen Bales himself lived. For years, the property had been run by a religious nonprofit that worked with at-risk kids, before it lost its funding and was left to sit empty. And when they arrived, she wasn't walking into a date at all. Waiting inside were Stephen Bales, Kaylin Ramsey, and Sierra Bemis. I'm not going to walk you through every detail of what happened next, because this story doesn't need that to land. What matters is this: Kayla was beaten and shot 3 times. To this day, investigators have never said which of them pulled the trigger, only that all 3 who were waiting were part of what happened next. Afterward, her body was wrapped and left inside the building. It didn't end there either. According to prosecutors, the following day, 4 of them, Stephen, Smith, Ramsey, and Bemis, actually went back to the building, not to check on her, to try to mask the smell as her body began to decompose, buying themselves more time before anyone found her. Police say the 6th person, Alexander Fico, was the one who later got rid of the gun. That detail, more than anything else, is what tells you this wasn't one moment of rage. Rage doesn't drive back the next day with air fresheners. What followed was a slow, staggered reckoning. Alexander Fico was the first to take a deal, pleading guilty in January 2024 to tampering with evidence and 3 counts of accessory after the fact. Narena Bales and Sierra Bemis struck deals of their own, entering no-contest pleas to second-degree murder rather than risk what a jury might decide, and both later took the stand to testify against Stephen. That left Stephen Bales as the only one of the 6 willing to fight the case in front of a jury. In March 2024, about a year after Kayla's body was found, that jury heard everything, including testimony from his own wife and former co-defendants. They deliberated for roughly 90 minutes. Then they came back, guilty of first-degree murder and guilty of conspiracy to commit murder. Bryn Smith and Kaylin Ramsey entered no-contest pleas shortly after, closing out the case against all 6. As for why, investigators never landed on one confirmed answer. Prosecutors did raise a couple of theories, and I want to be upfront that these are theories, not proven fact. One is that the killing was somehow tied to an earlier argument between Kayla and Kaylin Ramsey. The other is darker, and it's the one that's stuck with a lot of people who followed this case since, that on some level, it may have been carried out as a kind of wedding gift for Narena. Again, a theory prosecutors raised, never a confirmed motive. By the end of May 2024, all 6 defendants had been sentenced. Stephen Bales received life in prison without the possibility of parole. Narena Bales was sentenced to 13.5 to 30 years. Sierra Bemis received 19 to 30 years. Bryn Smith and Kaylin Ramsey were each sentenced to 40 to 60 years. And Alexander Fico, whose role came after the killing rather than during it, received the shortest sentence of the group, 5 to 10 years. At sentencing, the judge was blunt about Stephen Bales specifically, describing him as the one who led and set the plan in motion, while stopping short of calling him the sole architect behind it. 6 people, 6 sentences. One woman who never made it home from what she thought was a first date. If this case affected you the way it affected me, tell me in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you're new here, this channel exists for cases exactly like this one. The ones that take real time, real evidence, and a real jury to finally get right. Subscribe if that's the kind of true crime you're looking for. I'll see you in the next one.